Talk about, those days that it's miserable and you're going to have to be outside, and what
Yeah, I
motivates you,
mean,
and also
it's
some specific examples of things that you're so proud of.
well, so yeah, in terms of the miserableness of it, that it certainly does get hot, and sometimes the work is physical. I don't have a lot of bad days, so I'll put it there. Sometimes I'm not that young anymore, so huffing around and lifting old grave markers and climbing around on scaffolding isn't as easy as it used to be, but I still really enjoy it. And in terms of some of the things that we've worked on in Boston that I'm proud of, obviously I just talked about the brewer. We did an interesting project a few years ago, an air mansion
Oh yeah.
on Common Ave,
Yeah.
which is a Louis Tiffany design mosaics. It's
Mhm.
the last example of outdoor Louis Tiffany mosaics in the country. These and the things you find in Boston are
Yeah.
the
And
sort of range.
we've recognized both those projects with awards.
Right, I think that's true. Right, exactly. Right, right. And then another thing that that has been a fun project that we worked on, the mile markers that go from Boston all the way out to Springfield. The old Boston Post Road mile markers, where there's just this very interesting assortment of these little markers that went all the way from Boston to Springfield along the old postal road. And I think there were 100 of them. There's about 35 or 40 of them that are still there, and we had the opportunity to work for the Department of Transportation
Right.
and restore a bunch of those. And yeah, the first one we did was actually in Alston.
Right. Someone drove into it with a car.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. That sort of
And
started
cracked
off
it.
the
And
whole project.
that's right. That triggered an effort of ours to encourage the state to really look at beyond the one. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's, one thing we try to remind people is that preservation is an active effort. I mean, this stuff isn't, you're one of the best examples of this, right? People look at these things, it's like, oh, it's been there forever. Isn't that so wonderful? And think it's a passive thing. It's like, no, people have to do something.
That is one of the constant things that we have, and it's my job to explain why, when we're out there working as well, it's also, it's our job to restore these things and to preserve them, but it's also our job to explain to people why we're doing certain things. And, most of the things that we work on, obviously we do work for private collections and institutions and things like that, but a lot of the things that we work on are everybody's. So sort of an important part of what we do is not only out there working and trying to get everything done, but sort of stop and talk to people and let them know, these are the decisions we're making, and this is why we're doing it, and this is why this is important, which is another important thing of what the way we go about our business.
I see a copy of Day Ray Metallica behind you, and
Yeah.
one of the things that I think is fascinating about conservation is this. At the Alliance, we talk about the fact that Boston is so great because of the blend of old and new. And I think conservators, and I've seen it in a number of different folks, including people that restore pipe organs, I think is one of the greatest examples, is, old medieval text next to CAD stations, new technology and old technology used to the benefit of all of us as you're taking care of these old items. And then how to be careful that you're not getting carried away with the new stuff, that the traditional is often the safest, but there's lots of opportunity for things we've learned.
We try to use as much of the things that people use when they made them at the time, right? But sometimes it's not feasible, or sometimes they just did, in some ways they didn't work in the way that they were supposed to. Right. So you have to switch things up a little bit, but you always document it, and you always are trying to make sure that you're staying in the intent of what the person who actually made that trend.
Yeah, so in sort of a microcosm of what we say about the city in general, that blend of old and new.
Absolutely.
Would you like to share any thoughts about, the basic question, like, why do these things matter? I mean, you spend hundreds, thousands of hours, sometimes with a dental pick, and, from the street, people can't see necessarily, but why does this stuff matter? Why are you so proud of the work you do, and why do you think it's so important?
One thing that I read recently is, and I knew this from before, is that copper alloys, for example, are great at fighting at limiting virus. So if a virus goes on a piece of copper, it's going to last a lot less than it would on a piece of stainless or a piece of plastic or any other modern sort of material that we use. And again, a little out of what I do, but if you go around and you look at these old buildings, they all have copper doorknobs. They all have copper or bronze doorknobs, bronze railings, bronze doors. we knew a lot of stuff going on, and it's something that gets, I think that we don't realize how the people have gone through the same things we've been going through for a long time. And when you have these old buildings and you see, well, maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but they thought about the same kind of things that we're thinking about. And you can learn a tremendous amount from all the things that are up there. I mean, and in terms of the craftsmanship of things, we can learn an amazing amount from how to make things properly when you look back at what old things are. So there's a couple of sort of very scattered thoughts about it, but I find it fascinating in this time.
No, all good points. And I think, we have a tendency to think that we've progressed, and we have in many ways, but coming with that, I think, is a connected thought that we know more than they did. And they did. Right. I mean, we mentioned that a lot in environmental issues and the sort of the green nature of historic buildings. When you didn't have air conditioning, you had to creatively design a building in location and its design, and cupolas vented air naturally. And, I think people are starting to wise up to the fact that there's a lot to learn, even in the artwork and the things that you work with. So
yeah, and the same goes for the way people wrote. Like these, we started talking about these books in the background. I find it's amazing how much was documented by people making things just in different ways. It wasn't all on Google, but there's these incredible old catalogs of how people build things and decisions they made, why they build them, and there's a whole lot of really sort of different interesting ways that people went about their business.